Like many fans of Marvel's X-Men, I am anxiously anticipating their return to the small screen in the upcoming X-Men 97 animated series. Very little has been revealed about the series so far, but what we do know is that it picks up right where the classic cartoon from the 90s left off, and that many of the voice actors from the original series will be returning to their roles. Even though merchandise for X-Men 97 is already starting to hit store shelves, the show unfortunately won't air on Disney Plus for some time. I personally don't have a problem with this, as I've waited over 25 years to see more of this version of the X-Men. A few more months isn't going to kill us. So while we patiently wait for the premiere of this series, I thought now would be a good time to take a look at the X-Men animated series that we almost got instead of the incredible one that began airing in 1992. Please join me as we travel all the way back to 1989 and spend some time with the first and only episode of a much different X-Men animated series. If someone were to ask me what my favorite comic book series of all time is, I would have to say it's the Uncanny X-Men. The first comic book I ever purchased with my own money as a child was Uncanny X-Men number 211, and I've been following the adventures of Marvel's Merry Mutants ever since then. Wolverine and Colossus were my favorite characters, and even though many of the more mature themes went over my head as a kid, as I grew older I began to understand the social issues the comic book dealt with, such as intolerance and racism. These comics were pretty heavy stuff for a kid whose only experience with superheroes was mostly from the lighthearted stuff that aired on Saturday mornings. Unlike many popular superhero franchises of this time period, the X-Men did not have a tie-in Saturday morning cartoon or toy line, although they did make a few appearances in the animated series Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and Wolverine and Magneto were part of the Marvel Secret Wars toy line. The only way to follow the adventures of these characters was via the comic books, but in 1989 Marvel Productions was looking to change that. Marvel Action Universe was a block of cartoons featuring 30-minute episodes of the brand new shows Dino Riders and RoboCop, as well as reruns of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. At the time, most syndicated animated series ran for a total of 13 episodes, but Marvel Productions used the budget for the 13th episode of RoboCop to produce a pilot for an animated series featuring characters from the X-Men comic books. The plot of this cartoon was influenced by the storyline that introduced the character of Kitty Pryde, and the team lineup is very similar to the popular team that debuted in 1975's giant-sized X-Men number 1, with a couple of exceptions. This version of the X-Men consisted of Professor Xavier, Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Storm, Colossus, Dazzler, Kitty Pryde, and Wolverine. The X-Men's adversaries were known as the Brotherhood of Mutant Terrorists and were led by Magneto, with members Pyro, Juggernaut, the Blob, Toad, and the White Queen.
I'll try to avoid major spoilers as we take a look at this pilot, which we will refer to by the name it was given once it hit home video, Pride of the X-Men. After a brief voiceover by the legendary co-creator of the X-Men, Stan Lee,
Excelsior!
The episode begins with the White Queen breaking Magneto out of the custody of a military convoy. Now free, the leader of the Brotherhood of Mutant Terrorists plans to wipe out most of the human race by altering the course of the Scorpio Comet and having it collide with Earth so only mutants are left to rule the world. To do this, Magneto must magnify his powers with the Mutant Power Circuit, which is a part of the device that Professor Xavier uses to locate mutants known as Cerebro. Meanwhile, a new student named Kitty Pryde arrives at Professor Xavier's school. Kitty possesses the power to pass through solid matter, which is an ability known as phasing. She's introduced to the X-Men, who at the time are training in the Danger Room, which is a high-tech simulator that allows the X-Men to hone their skills by facing a combination of holograms and robotics. The X-Men's training is interrupted by a mutant alert, and the team travels off to face Brotherhood members the Blob and Pyro at the Deep Space Observatory. The attack was only a distraction to get the X-Men away from the mansion so Magneto and Juggernaut can recover the mutant power circuit from Cerebro. Professor X and Kitty attempt to prevent the villains from achieving their goal, but unfortunately they're unable to stop the much more powerful mutants from decimating the mansion and leaving with the mutant power circuit. The X-Men return to the mansion to find it destroyed and Kitty and Professor Xavier injured. Their injuries aren't severe, and the professor uses his powers to discover Magneto's plan and locate the Brotherhood of Mutant Terrorists, who are operating from Magneto's orbiting sanctuary known as Asteroid M. The X-Men rush to their jet capable of space travel known as the Blackbird and fly off to Asteroid M for a final battle with Magneto and his minions. This pilot was typical Saturday morning fare, and while more discerning fans of the source material may not enjoy the lighter tone of the show, it did a great job introducing people to the world of the X-Men. In its short runtime, the show introduces the concept of mutants, the X-Mansion, the Danger Room, Magneto's hideout at Asteroid M, and Cerebro. Main characters are introduced, and each one is giving at least one moment to showcase their abilities and show a bit of their personalities, but aside from Kitty and a little bit with Nightcrawler, there isn't much happening with the show in regards to character development. There's only so much that can be accomplished in 22 minutes, and the show hits all of its marks as an introduction to a franchise. However, that doesn't mean there aren't problems. The animation by the legendary studio Toei Animation is phenomenal, but there are moments in the pilot that come off as way too campy, and the action sequences are severely restrained compared to the ones depicted in the source material. This was a kid show after all, and a character like Wolverine would have to be severely altered to get past TV network standards and practices. Now, speaking of Wolverine, many purists will not like the way this fan favorite character is depicted on the show. For starters, Wolverine speaks in an Australian accent, and although this isn't the first time we've seen an Australian Wolverine,
Want a piece of fruit?
or the last, this is an odd choice considering so much of the character's history and background is based on where he's from.
I'm Canadian.
This decision may have forced writers to fundamentally alter a classic character. Plus, the animal that this character is named after is not even found in Australia. Kitty Pryde does not fare much better in this show either. She comes off as a whiny damsel in distress, but to be fair, this was just a pilot episode, so if the show went to series, maybe she would have a better story arc that established her as a more mature character. The inclusion of Dazzler in this lineup of the X-Men was also an odd choice, as the character was not a major character. Dazzler was a disco queen who could transform sound to light, and disco was dead for a while when the show came out. The Dazzler did have a brief run with the team in the late 80s and made some sporadic appearances in the comics after that, but I think her inclusion was an attempt to have another strong female character in the series. If that was the case, I could think of a few more characters that would have been more relevant when this pilot was produced, but I also believe that the producers could have done something with Dazzler and made her a fan favorite character. All of the other characters did not really have much to do, but they looked exactly like their comic counterparts, and in the short time each of them were on screen, they did not stray from the way that they are portrayed in the Marvel comics for the most part. Unfortunately, this pilot never made it to the series stage, so we will never know what will happen in this animated version of the X-Men. This wasn't the last time we would see this lineup, however, as Konami produced an amazing arcade game based on this show. In this side-scrolling beat-em-up, players choose one of 6 X-Men: Cyclops, Colossus, Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Dazzler as they attempt to stop Magneto and his allies from world domination. X-Men plays just like Konami's other popular arcade titles of this time period based on cartoons like The Simpsons and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Players fight their way through hordes of robotic sentinels and other minions before they take on some of Magneto's heavy hitters in some end-of-stage boss battles, before eventually taking on the Master of Magnetism himself. 2 cabinets were released for this title, one where 4 players could play simultaneously, and another where up to 6 players can all play at the same time. This game was a blast to play in the arcades, and even though it's unavailable on modern gaming systems, Arcade 1UP has released a 3/4 scale arcade cabinet where up to 4 players can experience the joy of playing this awesome arcade game in the privacy of their own home. While it may not hold up in modern times, Pride of the X-Men was a real treat for fans of the franchise when it originally came out. As a kid, I recorded it on VHS tape after its original broadcast and watched it so many times I could quote the dialogue by heart, and I dumped countless quarters into the arcade game growing up. I actually own the Arcade 1UP cabinet, and every time I fire it up, it takes me back to being a kid and playing the 6-player cabinet at the local putt-putt. The 90s cartoon was amazing, and I'm extremely looking forward to X-Men 97, but I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for the X-Men cartoon that never was. If you've never seen this cartoon, it's available unofficially on YouTube, or if you still have a VCR, you can find it on VHS on Amazon and many other places for a decent price. I strongly suggest checking out this show or the arcade game based on it if you get the opportunity. Till next time.